Hey biopsych students, my name is Gabriel Lariosa, and today I'm going to be trying to explain the relationship between schizophrenia and blindness at an undergraduate level. So, your learning objectives for this little lecture. By the end of the presentation, I expect you to be able to distinguish between the two types of blindness, describe how somebody with congenital blindness, how their brain differs from a typical brain, define schizophrenia and what the major positive and negative symptoms are, and briefly be able to describe the relationship between congenital blindness and schizophrenia. So a little accidental transition here. I didn't mean to add this. There it is. So what really is blindness? The ICD, or International Classification of Diseases, defines blindness as having a visual acuity of less than 3 over 60. So the difference between congenital and acquired blindness. Blindness can be divided in two general categories, congenital and acquired. Congenital refers to blindness that's present at birth. Somebody was born with it. Sometimes it's called genetic blindness for adults because people tend to associate congenital with children. Um, it's typically caused by complications in the uterus or genetic mutations. Um, a possible infection, a very common infection that causes this is called rubella syndrome or congenital rubella syndrome. It's also known as German measles. Um, Another contribution is environmental factors. Places with increased rates of poverty and environmental pollution have seen increased rates of congenital blindness. And Leber's congenital amaurosis occurs within 2 to 3 newborns out of every 100,000, and it is one of the leading causes of congenital blindness. And then acquired, it's kind of an umbrella term as well. It refers to any visual impairment which wasn't present at birth. It's typically caused by physiological complications such as cataracts, glaucoma, and also just age-related loss of vision. Then I have some prevalence rates. So congenital blindness is obviously the focus of this lecture. So on a neural level, there's three major things I want to focus on here. So there's major areas associated with schizophrenia specifically that are atrophied in, uh, I'm sorry, congenital blindness. And so we'll get back to that soon. Keep that in mind. Um, and then there's a lot of volume loss in gray matter and white matter, specifically in Brodmann areas 17, 18, and 19. That's essentially like most of the occipital lobe. And then the visual cortex in people that have schizophrenia is actually active. Well, it shows some activity. And so, what is schizophrenia? As I'm sure most of you know by now, schizophrenia is a psychotic disorder characterized by disruption in cognitive processes, emotional responsiveness, and social skills. So here I have some of the major symptoms of schizophrenia, just the major ones you'd read about, the ones you'd study. So they're, as I'm sure you know, they're generally categorized as positive or negative. Positive meaning additive, negative meaning subtractive. They subtract something from somebody's life. So the positive ones are a little harder to diagnose and not as prominent generally. So there's hallucinations, I'm sorry, delusions, disorganized thoughts and behaviors, concept disorganization, which includes rambling, incoherent verbalization, stuff like that, just like saying a bunch of nonsense. And then the negative symptoms are way more prominent, and they have a little mnemonic, I guess you could call it, the five negative A's. So there's blunted affect, which is an inability to express emotions effectively. Alogia, reduction in quantity of words spoken, so like it just trying to get to the point as fast as possible. Anhedonia, inability to feel pleasure, things you just don't enjoy, things you used to. Um, Avolition, inability to initiate goal-oriented behaviors, you just can't get things going. Asociality, inability to socialize properly. So it's just really hard to connect with other people. Another random transition. So what's the overlap here? So statistics suggest that around 100,000 Americans are diagnosed with the disorder every single year, And since the disorder was discovered or coined, whatever, in 1887, there hasn't been a single diagnosis of a person that has congenital blindness and schizophrenia. No comorbidity at all. The PAS. Bunch of unnecessary transitions. So how does congenital blindness interact with schizophrenia? So to be honest, we don't really know the concrete answer as of yet, but as I alluded to a second ago, the PAS, or the PASZ, protection against schizophrenia model, was created by two scientists, Landgraf and Osenheider, pretty recently, and it's really, really interesting. I'm going to show it in the next slide, but it basically shows how people with poor vision, not completely blind, but poor vision, are at the highest rates to have schizophrenia and also psychosis, as you can see here. And then the thalamus, I mentioned this a little earlier as well, but the thalamus and the thalamic networks have constantly and repeatedly been implicated in schizophrenia. And it's possible that the reduction in brain volume in that area that's correlated with it uh, has like less to go wrong. Here is that PAS model. Nope. So some possible explanations for this, as the PAS kind of hinted at, it suggests that the ability to see is necessary to develop schizophrenia. Not sufficient, but necessary. Um, And another possible explanation is that the altered neurophysiology associated with congenital blindness just simply doesn't have the structural foundation for schizophrenia to manifest. And finally, schizophrenia has been known to cause involuntary eye movements along with hallucinations, or visual hallucinations, I should say, further strengthening that connection between the visual and schizophrenia thing there. And just to tie it all up, I have some of the scientists, the two scientists that made the PAS, and then a quote referring to, oh here, an absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. So it's basically saying that although we need to like keep an open mind, and that it's very possible we just haven't discovered the person that's congenitally blind and schizophrenic, it's very likely there is no person out there because it's not possible. And yeah, here's my references.